Somehow, Stringers still haven't managed to get a big tournament win. Despite so many other weapons doing well recently, it seems like this class might just be doomed. But there's one glimmer of hope, one weapon that I've given the bows just a little bit of time in the sun at a competitive level. And that is Reef-Lux. When the game launched, people were literally spamming Reef-Lux in Turf War to try and farm turf and therefore money. And ever since then, Reef-Lux has been the most staple Turf War weapon we've ever seen. Despite numerous changes toning down the weapon's paint, it's constantly been seen as a success in that mode. Despite that though, the weapon hasn't won a single major tournament in any of the other 4 ranked modes. So what's going on here? Is it possible for Reef-Lux to win today? And why does it only see use in Turf War? For more weapon breakdowns, consider subscribing. And let's get started by breaking down why it's actually used in Turf. Reef-Lux has a few things about it that are great for Turf War. The most obvious one though was of course going to be its paint output. But that obviously can't be the full reason. Neo Splash paints far better and gets far more special weapons than Reef-Lux. So what makes Reef-Lux a better Turf War weapon? Well, I guess it's kind of obvious that it's the ton of missiles. What makes missiles so much better in Turf War than in any other mode? It's mostly down to the timing of the mode. Teamfights happen at very predictable pacing. On top of that, they'll pretty much always be the final main fight that decides the game at around the last 20 seconds or so. This means missiles' large cooldown isn't as big a problem in this mode, and it's very easy to time it around there. At the same time, missiles also paints quite a substantial amount where they land, and since they can land across the map, they can help boost turf score output at the very end of the game, while also allowing other weapons to move forward more easily. Another thing that benefits missiles in this mode is due to the lack of objective and slower pacing, people don't really have to give up strong positions or take as many risks as they do in the other modes. This can make retaking or pushing forward against good turf war teams a lot harder than it does in the ranked modes, another thing that missiles provides an easy solution to. Of course, the main weapon here matters too. Reef-Lux is incredibly mobile in turf war, and that's one area where it has an advantage over most other supports, but especially other missile supports. Curling Bomb, while normally not a great option for a support, is pretty good at inking turf or allowing you to break away to the opponent's base if they let their guard down, allowing you to turf a significant portion of the map. And the main weapon's tap shot paint are quite good at efficiently turfing areas such as spawn, another place where missiles comes in handy due to the range allowing it to be used from far away. The combination of all these factors together is what makes Reef-Lux so good in turf war. That and the lack of competition. Despite how much Reef-Lux has been nerfed in its paint output, nothing else can really do what it does. It provides answers to pretty much every important part of support in turf war while having almost no competition that could even do anything remotely similar to it. And that's given it a dominant niche that I don't think we're ever going to see go away. But as you might imagine, that niche doesn't really work as well for the ranked modes. Let's talk about the weapon and its kits and how those become weaker. First off, the main weapon. When taking into account support in other modes, the ability to help your teammates consistently is a much larger factor. Fights can break out a lot more frequently, and the positioning can be a lot more varied. Reef-Lux, unfortunately, isn't really that great at it. The only thing it really has going for it is the ability to do 45 damage if it hits one of its bolts, something that's still pretty narrow. That's basically it when it comes to its support. Its paint range doesn't extend very far, it has no method of chip damage, and its subs of Curling Bomb and Splash Wall just don't really do a whole lot to help teammates. Compare this to most supports being able to bomb for their teammates or having further range to attack enemies like Flingza and Dreadringer, and you can see that Reef-Lux is a lot weaker in terms of supporting its team, with its mobility being its only strong attribute, and then again still not being that good when compared to, you know, shooters. The paint output it has on the floor definitely still keeps up, but it does also have a problem when you have to switch between that and fighting. If you're painting a zone and are forced to take a 1v1, the paint output you're going to be putting on the floor is much weaker than any other support that's going to be fighting while trying to paint, since the charge shots paints a significant deal less. This also means that Reef-Lux while supporting is a bit easier to rush down. The one-shot threat is still there, of course, but it's very hit or miss. The weapon could still play around its mobility, but it has to hit very precise shots in order to defend itself that can have quite a steep learning curve, which ultimately makes it a support that people can't can't flex onto as easily. This is important because a lot of good supports are either shooters or similar to shooters like mini or dualies, which means the mechanics can transfer more easily, giving you more options. Reef-Lux, on the other hand, is a commitment that requires you to basically one-trick it, meaning you're not going to have as many options to cover its poor weaknesses. I already briefly mentioned the subs, but it's worth noting again how selfish of tools they are. Curling Bomb is mostly useful for the weapon's mobility and occasionally painting a little bit, but lacks a lot more when it comes to distance pressure. And while Wall can allow Reef-Lux to stand in positions it couldn't normally, it does still prevent it from helping its teammates a lot more. This forces a big dependency on its special weapons to cover the lack of team support, and that is Missiles and Reef Slider, which have their own fair share of problems. Missiles is still an amazing supportive tool in the base game, but remember in Turf War it's a lot easier to time your pushes around that. In the base game, the long cooldown of missiles and 210 points for special charge means that it's difficult to get a frequent amount of missiles or have them as often as you need them, which only stacks with that problem. Reef Slider is 10 points cheaper and a little bit easier to use, but comes with a bit of a risk of you dying in it, as well as is a bit harder to combo off of compared to other weapons like Dread. It does at least have more consistent output of Reef Slider, but I think you can see there are a lot of problems here. This means that, as a support, Reef-Lux really struggles. There is some occasional utility in other modes, such as its DPS and Rainmaker, or being able to slider to the basket and Clam Blitz, but for the most part, none of the ranked modes really provide much of an advantage to Reef-Lux. So what about switching the roles? What if instead we played Reef-Lux in the fighting weapon slot instead? This on paper works a little bit better, and truthfully we do tend to see a little bit more Reef-Lux decos in tournaments like Area Cup, which get played kinda half and half like that. You can fight for yourself decently well using Wall, and without having to support as much, your team can still have good utility, such as having a Splash or a Dually to cover Crab Tank. However, is Reef-Lux's fighting power really on the level as most other midline weapons? Probably not. Between its dependency on hitting a one-shot and its lack of range, it can very easily be spaced out by other opponents. Its mobility still makes that a challenge, but it still struggles. The most recent example of a somewhat successful Reef-Lux comp I saw tended to be playing around the weapon in sort of an in-between role. It was with Edit, Tri-Nouveau, and S-Blast. In, you might have guessed it, an Area Cup comp. This was only used on a few maps, such as Barnacle, Sturgeon, or Flounder, which, as you might have guessed, are mostly shorter range maps where the comp could thrive. Tri-Nouveau in particular is a great pair for Reef-Lux, since it prevents people from getting up close to it, and it seems like the double cooler helps a lot with Reef-Lux, just in terms of it being punished a bit less. Being paired with S-Blast makes a lot of sense. It covers AoE, has Burst Bomb, and overall with Booyah Bomb has better retake and paint tools. However, the comp only saw success on 2 short-range and very limited maps, which means that it clearly doesn't have a whole lot of wider utility. Currently, I think Reef-Lux is just stuck in a bit of an awkward spot between 2 very different roles. In Turf War, the weapon's qualities synergize very well to have a solid placement into one of them, but in the game right now, it's a bit tricky to find a comp where Reef-Lux fully fits in. And even if you were to figure that out, that doesn't guarantee the weapon would be able to find major success, since it obviously has a huge difficulty curve to it that requires a lot of investment. Not a whole lot of people are going to do that for a weapon that isn't proven to be worth it. So, at least in my opinion so far, when it comes to the ability to win a major tournament, I'm a bit skeptical that we'll see it on more than just a few maps right now. But let me know what you guys think of Reef-Lux below, and what changes do you think it could use to help it out in its journey to win. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.